"I'm rubbish now," the black woman said bitterly, as the rancher pulled the cloth from the ancient portrait, and couldn't speak. The stagecoach had deposited her like unwanted cargo in Cedar Ridge, where townsfolk whispered she was just another charity case destined for scrubbing floors until she died forgotten. But when the third-generation cattle rancher's prized herd began dying from a mysterious disease that baffled every expert, desperation drove him to listen when the dismissed woman offered help. What he discovered beneath her humble exterior would unravel everything he believed about his family's legacy and the land beneath his boots. Would the rancher choose comfortable lies over a truth that could destroy his world, or embrace revelations that might save them both? The dust cloud from the westbound stagecoach settled over Cedar Ridge like a funeral shroud. Hannah Carver stepped down onto the wooden platform, her worn boots hitting the planks with a hollow thud. She clutched a leather satchel against her chest, its surface cracked from years of use. The station master didn't meet her eyes. Two women in pressed calico dresses whispered behind gloved hands. A man in a bowler hat spat into the dirt and turned away. Hannah walked toward the main street. Her dress, once fine blue cotton, bore careful patches at the elbows. The hem showed months of prairie dust. She held her chin high despite the stares that followed her every step. The general store's bell chimed as she pushed through the door. Shelves lined with canned goods and bolts of fabric stretched toward the ceiling. The proprietor, a thin man with wire spectacles, looked up from his ledger. "Help you with something?" "I'm seeking employment. I can read, write, and keep accounts." His eyes swept over her appearance. "Nothing here for you. Try the boarding house. Mrs. Abernathy sometimes needs cleaning help." Hannah's jaw tightened. "I have other skills that might prove valuable." "I'm sure you do." His tone carried dismissal. "Boarding house is 2 blocks north." The saloon doors swung shut before she could finish her question. The blacksmith barely glanced up from his anvil. Each rejection felt like another weight added to her shoulders. Mrs. Abernathy answered the boarding house door with flour-dusted hands. She was a sturdy woman with graying hair pinned in a tight bun. "You the one looking for work?" "Yes, ma'am. I can cook, clean, and tend to medical needs." Mrs. Abernathy's eyebrows rose. "Medical needs? You some kind of doctor?" "I have training in healing arts." "Well, I don't need doctoring. I need floors scrubbed and laundry done. $5 a month plus a room in the back. Take it or leave it." Hannah's shoulders sagged. Back in Virginia, she had commanded 20 times that amount for a single treatment. "I'll take it." The room was barely larger than a closet. A narrow cot, a wash basin, and a single window that faced the alley. Hannah set her satchel on the wooden crate that served as a table. She caught her reflection in the cracked mirror above the basin. "I'm rubbish now." The words tasted bitter in her mouth. 6 months ago, she had been Hannah Carver, respected healer. Families traveled days to seek her knowledge of herbs and remedies passed down through generations. Then came the Ashford estate. Their prized thoroughbreds had fallen ill and they demanded her help. She had diagnosed the problem correctly. The treatment was simple, but when she requested access to the veterinary supplies in town, the doors slammed shut. No one would sell medicine to a black woman, regardless of her knowledge or the Ashfords' recommendation. The horses died. The Ashfords blamed her. Word spread through Virginia's social circles like wildfire. Suddenly, no one would see her. No one would listen. Hannah had sold everything she owned to buy passage west. Colorado territory promised new beginnings. Instead, she found the same closed doors painted different colors. Outside her window, a commotion stirred in the street. Men on horseback rode past, their faces grim. Hannah recognized the look of ranchers facing trouble. 3 miles outside town, Jedediah Cole stood in his pasture surrounded by death. 5 cattle lay motionless in the grass. Their eyes were clouded, their bodies already stiffening in the afternoon heat. Dr. Matthews crouched beside the nearest carcass, shaking his head. The town's veterinarian had exhausted his knowledge days ago. "It's spreading faster." Jedediah's voice carried the weight of 3 generations. His grandfather had claimed this land. His father had built the herd. Now Jedediah watched it die animal by animal. Could be poison plant, could be disease, could be cursed for all I know. Dr. Matthews stood, brushing dirt from his knees. I've tried everything in my bag. Jedediah surveyed the pasture. 40 head of cattle remained. Yesterday it had been 45. At this rate, he would lose everything within the month. The Cole Ranch had weathered drought, harsh winters, and market crashes. 3 generations of his family were buried in the cemetery plot overlooking these fields. Jedediah would not be the one to lose it all. But traditional methods had failed. Dr. Matthews had failed. The veterinarian from Denver had failed. Time was running out. Hannah heard the men return to town as evening fell. Through her thin walls, she listened to their defeated voices in the boarding house dining room. Cattle disease, mysterious deaths, no solutions. Her fingers traced the leather satchel's worn surface. Inside lay remedies her grandmother had taught her. Knowledge passed down through generations of healers who had saved livestock across 3 states. But she was just the cleaning woman now, who would listen to rubbish. If you are enjoying this story of how prejudice and desperation clash in the Wild West, don't forget to comment where you are tuning in from to show how this story can connect us across any distances, backgrounds, and hearts. Because what will happen in the next part in Cedar Ridge will completely change everything Hannah and Jedediah thought they knew about healing, legacy, and the power of hidden knowledge. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Cole Ranch as Hannah approached the pasture fence. She had scrubbed floors until her knees ached, then slipped away while Mrs. Abernathy counted linens. Jedediah stood among his remaining cattle, his hat pulled low against the glare. Another cow lay dead since yesterday. The stench of decay mixed with the sweet scent of prairie grass. Hannah cleared her throat. Jedediah turned, surprise flickering across his weathered face. "You lost your way, miss. I came to help with your cattle." His laugh held no humor. "Dr. Matthews can't figure it out. The Denver veterinarian gave up. What could you possibly know about ranching?" Hannah stepped closer to the fence. The living cattle showed telltale signs she recognized immediately. Labored breathing, excessive drooling, the particular way they held their heads. "Your animals are being poisoned by larkspur, the purple flowers growing in the north pasture." Jedediah's expression shifted from dismissal to attention. "How could you know that? The symptoms are unmistakable if you know what to look for." "And you do." Hannah lifted her chin. The moment of truth had arrived. She could retreat to her scrub bucket and safe invisibility, or she could reveal who she really was. "My name is Hannah Carver. I'm a master herbalist trained by my grandmother, who saved more livestock in 3 states than any veterinarian you've ever met." Jedediah stared at her. "You're Mrs. Abernathy's cleaning woman." "I'm a healer who happens to clean floors to survive." The skepticism in his eyes cut deep. Hannah had seen that look before. The assumption that her knowledge couldn't possibly match her appearance. "If you're such an expert, why are you scrubbing floors in Cedar Ridge?" The question hung between them like a challenge. Hannah's hands trembled as she reached for her leather satchel. "6 months ago, I was the most sought-after animal healer in Virginia. The Ashford family called me to their estate when their thoroughbreds fell ill. I diagnosed the problem correctly. I knew exactly what medicine they needed." Hannah opened the satchel. Inside, small cloth pouches held dried herbs. Glass vials contained tinctures. Tools wrapped in soft leather gleamed in the sunlight. "But when I went to town for supplies, every door closed. No one would sell medicine to someone like me. The horses died while I stood outside locked shops with useless money in my hands." Jedediah's expression softened slightly. "The Ashfords blamed you." Word spread faster than wildfire. Suddenly, no one would see me. Families who had trusted me for years turned away. My reputation died with those horses. Hannah lifted a small pouch of dried leaves. "This is boneset. Combined with wild cherry bark, it counteracts larkspur poisoning. My grandmother taught me the recipe when I was 12 years old." "Your grandmother was a healer." Ezra Me Carver. After the war, she traveled from farm to farm saving animals that conventional medicine couldn't help. She knew every healing plant from Kentucky to Colorado. Hannah's voice gained strength as she spoke of her heritage. She taught me that knowledge belongs to those who would use it wisely. She learned from Cherokee medicine women, African healing traditions, and frontier necessity. Jedediah looked at the dead cattle, then back at Hannah's confident posture. Desperation warred with prejudice in his mind. Why should I trust you when trained veterinarians have failed? Because they're treating symptoms, not the cause. They see sick cattle and think disease. I see the whole picture. Hannah pointed toward the north pasture. That's where larkspur grows thickest. Your cattle graze there in early morning when the toxins are strongest. Move them to the south pasture immediately. And the sick ones? I can save them, but we need to act now. Jedediah studied her face. The cleaning woman was gone. In her place stood someone with unshakable confidence in her abilities. What do you need? Hannah smiled for the first time since arriving in Cedar Ridge. Access to your kitchen, clean water, and trust that 5 generations of healing knowledge might know something your doctors don't. Within an hour, Hannah had transformed the ranch house kitchen into a makeshift laboratory. Steam rose from boiling pots. The air filled with the sharp scent of medicinal herbs. She worked with practiced efficiency, measuring ingredients by feel rather than sight. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory, guiding each step. Jedediah watched in fascination as Hannah prepared the remedy. Her movements held the precision of a surgeon combined with the intuition of an artist. How long did you train? My whole life. Grandmother started teaching me before I could write my name. Said healing hands were gifts that shouldn't be wasted. Hannah strained the mixture through clean cloth. The liquid emerged clear and pale green. This goes directly into their mouths, 3 times daily until the trembling stops. They walked to the pasture together. Hannah approached the first sick cow without hesitation. The animal's eyes rolled with fear, but Hannah's touch remained gentle and sure. Easy, girl. This will help. The cow accepted the medicine with minimal struggle. Hannah moved to the next animal, then the next. How long before we see results? If I'm right, improvement within 24 hours. Full recovery within a week. Jedediah helped her treat the remaining cattle. As they worked, he found himself studying this woman who had appeared from nowhere with knowledge that might save his ranch. Why didn't you tell anyone in town about your skills? Hannah's laugh carried bitter wisdom. Would you have believed Mrs. Abernathy's cleaning woman could heal your cattle? The question needed no answer. They both knew the truth. Dawn broke over the Cole ranch with unusual quiet. No cattle lay dying in the grass. Hannah stood at the kitchen window, watching the sun paint the pasture gold. The sick cattle were standing. Their breathing had steadied overnight. The excessive drooling had stopped. Jedediah emerged from the barn, his stride quicker than it had been in weeks. He found Hannah checking her remaining supplies. 3 of them are eating again. Hannah nodded, unsurprised. They'll be fully recovered within days. The others will follow. Dr. Matthews wants to examine them this afternoon. Good. He should see what traditional knowledge can accomplish. Word had already begun spreading through Cedar Ridge. Mrs. Abernathy had noticed Hannah's absence from morning duties. The general store proprietor had seen her walking toward the Cole ranch at dawn. By noon, Dr. Matthews arrived with 2 other ranchers in tow. They stood at the pasture fence, watching cattle that should have been dead grazing peacefully. Remarkable recovery. Dr. Matthews examined the nearest cow with professional fascination. What treatment did you use? Hannah showed him the remaining herbal mixture. Boneset, wild cherry bark, and several other plants. It counteracts larkspur poisoning. Larkspur, Dr. Matthews frowned. I considered that but dismissed it. The symptoms didn't match my textbooks. Textbooks describe what happens in controlled environments. Real poisoning presents differently. The 2 visiting ranchers exchanged glances. One stepped forward, removing his hat. Ma'am, I'm Tom Bradley. I've got horses showing similar symptoms. Would you consider examining them? Hannah looked to Jedediah. He nodded encouragement. I'll come this afternoon. Bradley's horses suffered from a different problem entirely. Hannah diagnosed selenium poisoning from local weed growing in their pasture. The treatment required different herbs, but the principle remained the same. Within 3 days, Bradley's horses were recovering. News traveled faster than wildfire across the Colorado Territory. A healer had appeared in Cedar Ridge, someone who could save animals that trained veterinarians couldn't help. Farmers arrived from settlements 50 miles away. They brought cattle, horses, sheep, and pigs. Each case presented unique challenges that tested Hannah's knowledge. She treated a rancher's prize bull for bloat using fennel and ginger root. A farmer's milk cow recovered from mastitis with plantain and comfrey poultices. Horses with colic responded to peppermint and willow bark preparations. Jedediah watched the transformation with growing amazement. The woman he had dismissed as Mrs. Abernathy's cleaning girl commanded respect from hardened ranchers. Hannah worked 18-hour days. Her leather satchel emptied as she used precious supplies. But with each successful treatment, her confidence returned. You need to charge proper fees. Jedediah found her preparing remedies in his kitchen late one evening. These people have little money. They have livestock worth hundreds of dollars. Your knowledge saved them fortunes. Hannah paused in her grinding of dried herbs. In Virginia, I charged $25 per treatment. Then charge $25 here. People won't pay a cleaning woman that much. Jedediah set down his coffee cup firmly. You're not a cleaning woman, you're a healer. Start acting like one. The next morning, Hannah resigned from the boarding house. Mrs. Abernathy accepted the news with surprising grace. Always knew you were meant for better things. Something about the way you carried yourself. Hannah moved her few belongings to a spare room at the Cole Ranch. Jedediah insisted she needed proper space to work. Consider it payment for saving my herd. Within a week, Hannah had established the first veterinary practice in 3 counties run by a woman. Ranchers lined up outside the ranch house each morning, seeking her expertise. Dr. Matthews became her most unlikely ally. Instead of resenting her success, he studied her methods with scientific curiosity. Your grandmother's knowledge fills gaps in formal training. Would you teach me some techniques? Hannah agreed, sharing remedies that had been passed down through generations. In return, Dr. Matthews provided access to medical supplies that had been denied to her elsewhere. The partnership benefited everyone. Dr. Matthews learned traditional healing methods. Hannah gained legitimacy through association with an established professional. Jedediah marveled at the change in his property. The ranch house buzzed with constant activity. Hannah had converted the large parlor into an examination room. The kitchen served as her laboratory. Your place has become the most important building in the territory. Hannah smiled, checking on a rancher's sick colt. Knowledge finds its own level. Suppress it in one place, it emerges somewhere else. Is that your grandmother's wisdom too? That's mine. The transformation extended beyond Hannah's professional success. Townspeople who had ignored her now sought her attention. The general store proprietor offered credit. The saloon keeper tipped his hat when she passed, but Hannah remembered each slight, each closed door. Respect built on necessity felt different than respect freely given. Still, she was no longer rubbish. She was Hannah Carver, master healer, the woman whose knowledge had saved countless animals across Colorado Territory. Late one evening, as Hannah cleaned her tools after a particularly challenging case, she noticed something peculiar. The dried herbs in her collection included plants she recognized from childhood stories. Plants her grandmother had described as growing in a special place. A place where the old woman had learned some of her most powerful remedies. Hannah walked to the ranch house window and looked out over Jedediah's land. The moonlight revealed familiar shapes in the landscape. Rock formations her grandmother had described. A creek that curved exactly as the old stories claimed. Her breath caught in her throat. This land held secrets that went deeper than cattle and medicine. Secrets that connected her to this place in ways she had never imagined. Hannah pressed her palm against the cool glass. Tomorrow she would begin investigating the strange familiarity that had haunted her since arriving at the Cole Ranch. Some questions demanded answers, no matter how unsettling the truth might prove to be. Hannah woke before dawn, drawn by an inexplicable urge to explore the northern boundary of Jedediah's property. She dressed quietly and slipped from the ranch house into the cool morning air. The landscape felt familiar in ways that defied logic. She had never been to Colorado before arriving in Cedar Ridge, yet her feet found paths that seemed carved into her memory. A cluster of red rocks jutted from a hillside exactly where her childhood mind expected them. A natural spring bubbled from the earth at the spot her grandmother had described in old stories. Hannah knelt beside the spring, her heart racing. This was the place grandmother Ezra Mee had spoken of during long winter evenings in Virginia, the sacred ground where she had learned the most powerful healing secrets. But how could that be? Grandmother had died when Hannah was 15. She had never mentioned actually traveling to Colorado. Hannah cupped the spring water in her palms and tasted it. The mineral content matched her grandmother's descriptions perfectly. Footsteps approached from behind. Jedediah appeared through the morning mist, concern creasing his weathered face. "You're up early, everything all right?" "This spring. How long has it been here?" "Far as I know, forever. My grandfather used to bring cattle here to drink, said it was the sweetest water in the territory." Hannah studied his expression carefully. "Tell me about your grandfather. When did he first claim this land?" "Around 1851. He was one of the first settlers in these parts." The date sent a chill through Hannah's body. Her grandfather had disappeared in 1851, traveling west and never returning. "Was he alone when he settled here?" Jedediah scratched his beard thoughtfully. "Family stories mention a partner in the early days, someone who knew the land better than grandfather did, but I never heard much about it." Hannah's pulse quickened. "What happened to this partner?" "Don't rightly know. Grandfather never talked about those early years much." Hannah spent the morning treating a rancher's horses, but her mind remained fixed on the spring and Jedediah's casual mention of a mysterious partner. That afternoon, she walked to the Cedar Ridge land office. The clerk, a nervous young man named Timothy, looked up from his filing. "Help you with something, Miss Carver." Her new reputation had reached even the dusty corners of the courthouse. "I need to research property records from 1851. Timothy retrieved a leather-bound ledger from a locked cabinet. The pages were yellowed with age, the ink faded but still readable. Hannah's finger traced down the entries until she found what she was looking for. Her breath stopped in her throat. Ezekiel Carver, 1851, joint claim with Jacob Cole. Her grandfather's name, recorded in official documents, listed as equal partner with Jedediah's grandfather. Timothy, what would joint claim mean? The clerk peered at the entry over his spectacles. Equal ownership. Both parties held legal title to the entire property. What happened to dissolve the partnership? Timothy flipped through several more pages. Here, 1852, transfer of ownership. Ezekiel Carver's share transferred to Jacob Cole. Was their payment recorded? No monetary exchange listed. Usually that means death or abandonment. Hannah's hands trembled as she copied the relevant information. Her grandfather hadn't simply disappeared. He had been Jacob Cole's equal partner in establishing what became the most successful ranch in the territory. She walked back toward the ranch in a daze, pieces of family history rearranging themselves in her mind. Grandmother Ezra Mee's detailed knowledge of this land suddenly made sense. Her grandfather had shared every detail through letters before his death. That evening, Hannah found Jedediah reviewing account books in the ranch house parlor. "I found something at the land office today." He looked up from his ledger. "About what?" "Your grandfather's partner. His name was Ezekiel Carver." Jedediah's pen stopped moving. "Carver. Like your name." "He was my grandfather." The words hung in the air between them like a loaded gun. Jedediah set down his pen slowly. "That's not possible." Hannah showed him the copied records. Joint claim, 1851. Equal partnership until 1852. Jedediah studied the documents with growing unease. "My family never mentioned any Carver." "What did they tell you about how your grandfather acquired the land?" that he claimed it fair and square. Worked hard to build what we have today. Hannah's voice remained steady despite the emotions churning inside her. According to these records, half of what you have today belonged to my family. Jedediah stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Even if that's true, it was 70 years ago. Legal transfers were made. Under what circumstances? I don't know. I wasn't there. Hannah joined him at the window, looking out over the land that might have been her inheritance. I think I know where we can find answers. What do you mean? Your grandfather built this house. There might be papers, documents, something that explains what really happened. Jedediah's jaw tightened. My father went through everything when grandfather died. There's nothing. Are you certain? The question challenged everything Jedediah believed about his family's legacy. If Hannah was right, if her grandfather had been cheated out of his rightful share, then the Cole Ranch was built on a lie. There's a locked room upstairs. Father sealed it after grandfather's death, said it contained private family matters. Hannah felt her heart racing. Have you ever opened it? Never had reason to. Father made it clear the room was to remain untouched. I think we need to open it now. Jedediah stared at his reflection in the window glass. Opening that room would mean confronting truths his family had buried for decades. But Hannah deserved to know what had happened to her grandfather, and Jedediah deserved to know if his legacy was built on honor or theft. Tomorrow, he said quietly. We'll open it tomorrow. Neither of them slept well that night, knowing that whatever they found in that locked room would change their understanding of the past forever. The locked door stood at the end of the upstairs hallway like a silent sentinel. Jedediah had walked past it countless times without curiosity. Now it seemed to pulse with hidden secrets. Hannah waited as he retrieved the key from his father's desk. Her hands remained steady, but her heart hammered against her ribs. The lock turned with a rusty click. The door swung open, releasing air that smelled of dust and old leather. Sunlight streamed through a single window, illuminating a room frozen in time. A desk sat covered with papers. Books lined wooden shelves. In the corner, a cloth draped over something large and rectangular. Hannah stepped inside first. Her eyes swept over the preserved space, taking in details that spoke of a man who valued knowledge and friendship. Jedediah followed reluctantly. He had expected the room to feel like a shrine to his grandfather. Instead, it felt like a tomb holding buried shame. Hannah approached the desk. Papers lay scattered across its surface as if someone had left mid-conversation. She lifted the first document carefully, a partnership agreement, dated 1851, signed by Jacob Cole and Ezekiel Carver in bold, confident strokes. They were true partners. Hannah's voice carried wonder and sadness. Equal shares in everything. Jedediah read over her shoulder. The agreement detailed how the two men would split profits, share responsibilities, and build something lasting together. Hannah picked up another paper, a letter in her grandfather's handwriting, addressed to his wife back in Kentucky. Jacob is like a brother to me. We work dawn to dusk building our dream. The land here speaks to the soul. More letters followed, chronicling months of friendship and shared labor. The two men had built the first cabin together, brought in the first cattle as equal partners. Hannah's grandfather wrote of teaching Jacob about water sources and grazing patterns. Jacob shared his knowledge of construction and business. They weren't just partners. Hannah held up a letter describing shared meals and long conversations. They were friends. Jedediah found himself drawn to his grandfather's writing. Jacob Cole described Ezekiel as the wisest man he had ever known. Someone who understood the land like it was part of his own body. Then the tone of the letters changed. Hannah found the shift first, in a letter dated late 1851. Ezekiel took sick last week, fever that won't break, I fear for his life. The next letter was worse. Ezekiel's condition had worsened. Jacob wrote of his desperation to save his friend and partner. He speaks of his daughter back home, makes me promise to send word to his family if the worst happens. Hannah's breath caught. She had never known her grandfather had spoken of her mother during his final days. The last letter in the sequence bore a date that changed everything. March 15, 1852. Ezekiel passed this morning. I held his hand as he died. He made me promise to care for his share of our dream. Said his family back east wouldn't understand this wild country. Jedediah's world shifted as he read his grandfather's actual words. He asked me to buy out his share and send the money to his widow. I swore on his grave I would honor that promise. But there was more. A bank draft dated 2 weeks later made out to Mrs. Ezra Me Carver in Kentucky. $500, a fortune in 1852. He paid for grandfather's share. Jedediah's voice held disbelief. My grandfather was an honorable man. Hannah stared at the bank draft, confusion clouding her features. This money never reached my grandmother. She died poor, believing grandfather had abandoned his family. They searched through more papers, finding copies of additional letters Jacob had written to Kentucky. Each one went unanswered. Then Hannah found the explanation. A letter returned to Jacob, marked addressee unknown. The Postal Service in Kentucky had failed to locate Ezra Me Carver. Jacob had tried to honor his promise. But without an address, the money had remained in his possession. He kept trying. Jedediah found evidence of Jacob's continued efforts to locate Ezekiel's family, letters to various Kentucky towns, inquiries through territorial authorities. Hannah's anger began to shift into something more complex. Jacob Cole hadn't stolen her grandfather's share. He had become its unwilling guardian, but questions remained. Why had the room been locked? Why had Jacob's son buried this history? The answer lay beneath the cloth in the corner. Jedediah approached the draped object with growing dread. Something about its shape and size filled him with foreboding. Hannah joined him as he grasped the cloth's edge. Together, they pulled it away. A daguerreotype in an ornate frame revealed two men standing side by side. One was clearly Jacob Cole, recognizable from other family photos. The other was a man with Hannah's eyes and determined jaw. But it was their positioning that stole Jedediah's ability to speak. They stood as equals, hands on each other's shoulders. Jacob's arm draped around Ezekiel in unmistakable friendship. They looked like brothers, partners who had built something meaningful together. Below the photograph, a brass plate bore an inscription. Jacob Cole and Ezekiel Carver, partners and friends, 1851. Hannah touched the glass over her grandfather's face. The man she had known only through stories suddenly became real. Your grandfather loved mine. Her voice carried no accusation, only wonder. Jedediah stared at the photograph that rewrote everything he had believed. His grandfather hadn't been a solitary pioneer. He had built the Cole Ranch with a partner whose contributions had been erased from family history. Why did my father hide this? Hannah studied Jacob Cole's face in the photograph. Because the world in 1852 wasn't ready to celebrate friendships that crossed certain lines. Your father probably thought he was protecting the family reputation. The locked room had preserved the truth that shame had tried to bury. Two men who had seen past differences to build something lasting together. But their partnership had been cut short by death and lost letters. Now, 70 years later, their grandchildren stood in the same room, holding evidence of what might have been. I can't speak, Jedediah whispered, overwhelmed by the weight of hidden history. Hannah placed her hand on his shoulder just as their grandfathers had posed in the photograph. What happens now? The photograph sat on the kitchen table between them like a bridge across decades of buried history. Hannah traced her finger along the brass nameplate while Jedediah stared at his coffee, wrestling with a decision that would define his character. The money your grandfather set aside for my family, it's still rightfully ours. Jedediah nodded slowly. With 70 years of interest, it amounts to a considerable sum. Enough to buy half this ranch at current value. The words hung in the air. Hannah could claim her legal inheritance, force the sale of property, and destroy everything the Cole family had built. Justice served cold after 7 decades. Instead, she pushed the bank draft across the table toward him. I don't want to destroy what our grandfathers created together. Jedediah looked up, surprise evident in his weathered features. What are you saying? They were partners, true partners. Maybe it's time to honor that legacy properly. Hannah stood and walked to the window overlooking the pasture where they had first worked together to save dying cattle. This land has been profitable under your family's management. My healing practice brings value too. We could continue what they started. Jedediah joined her at the window. A formal partnership, equal shares, shared responsibilities. The way it should have been. Some folks in town won't understand. Hannah smiled, remembering her first day in Cedar Ridge when she had been dismissed as worthless. Some folks thought I was rubbish. They were wrong then too. That afternoon, they rode into town together. The sight of the coal ranch owner and the territory's most respected healer traveling side by side drew attention from every storefront. At the land office, Timothy looked up nervously as they entered. "Can I help you folks?" Jedediah placed the original partnership agreement on the clerk's desk. "We need to file restoration of joint ownership. The Carver family claim was never properly resolved." Timothy's hands shook as he examined the documents. "This will require territorial approval, could take months." "We'll wait." Hannah's voice carried the confidence of someone who had learned patience through hardship. Word spread through Cedar Ridge faster than a prairie fire. The Cole Ranch, pillar of the community for 70 years, had a new co-owner. A black woman who had arrived as a nobody now held title to the most valuable property in 3 counties. Mrs. Abernathy found Hannah at the general store the next morning. "Heard the news. Some folks are saying you tricked poor Jedediah somehow. What do you think?" The older woman studied Hannah's face carefully. "I think you could have taken everything and chose to share instead. That says more about your character than theirs." Dr. Matthews proved even more supportive. "A healing partnership makes perfect sense. Your knowledge of traditional remedies combined with Jedediah's business experience could transform this whole territory." Not everyone embraced the change. 3 ranchers canceled appointments with Hannah's veterinary practice. The saloon keeper muttered about outsiders disrupting natural order. But for every door that closed, 2 more opened. Farmers from distant settlements traveled days to seek Hannah's expertise. Her reputation for healing impossible cases attracted clients from as far as Denver. Within 6 months, the Cole Carver Ranch had become the most profitable operation in Colorado Territory. Hannah's veterinary practice generated substantial income, while Jedediah's cattle business expanded into new markets. They hired 4 additional workers to handle the increased business. The ranch house buzzed with constant activity as healing and ranching merged into something neither could have achieved alone. Hannah moved the daguerreotype of their grandfathers to the main parlor, displayed prominently above the fireplace. Visitors often asked about the 2 men in the photograph. "Our grandfathers, Jacob Cole and Ezekiel Carver, the original partners who founded this ranch." Some visitors looked uncomfortable with the story. Others found inspiration in the tale of friendship that transcended social barriers. Hannah didn't care about the skeptics. She had learned to measure her worth by results rather than opinions. One evening, as she reviewed account books with Jedediah, she paused to look around the room where she had once prepared desperate remedies for dying cattle. "Do you ever regret it? Sharing ownership instead of keeping everything?" Jedediah followed her gaze to the photograph of their grandfathers. "Best decision I ever made. This place has more life in it now than it did in decades under my family alone." Hannah nodded toward the window where healthy cattle grazed in moonlit pastures. "They would be proud. Your grandmother, too. All that knowledge she preserved finally has the respect it deserves." A year after that first desperate morning when Hannah had approached a dying herd with nothing but herbal remedies and determination, she stood in the same pasture as a landowner and successful businesswoman. The transformation felt surreal sometimes. From scrubbing floors for $5 a month to owning half of the most prosperous ranch in the territory. But the change went deeper than financial success. Hannah had reclaimed her identity as a healer, honored her family's legacy, and proved that knowledge and character mattered more than prejudice and assumptions. Children in Cedar Ridge now grew up hearing stories about the healing woman who could save any animal. Some even asked to learn her remedies, ensuring that traditional knowledge would survive another generation. Hannah's leather satchel, once her only possession of value, now sat in a place of honor in the ranch house parlor. Young apprentices learned to prepare the same remedies that had saved Jedediah's cattle and changed both their lives forever. The woman who had once called herself rubbish now stood as proof that true worth cannot be diminished by circumstances or recognized by appearance alone. In the photograph above the fireplace, Jacob Cole and Ezekiel Carver seemed to smile down at their granddaughter and grandson, finally united in the partnership that death had interrupted but determination had restored.